Now, the interesting thing is, he's on the mountainside. He sees them. He starts down, it says. Shortly before dawn, he went after them, walking on the lake. He was about to pass him by. And I'm sitting up here thinking, if I'm a disciple, he about to pass me by. Don't he realize all I've been going through for him? What could he possibly be thinking about leaving me in a situation like this? I mean, it's okay if you leave the other folks like that, but me, I don't think so. I mean, think about it. Jesus needs to understand that he isn't making my world be the way I want my world to be. I mean, isn't that really the issue most of the time? Your world, God isn't making it the way you expect it to be. And so you're a little bit frustrated with him because things just aren't going like that. And now talk about that. But what does Jesus do? Jesus is going to act, and then Jesus is going to speak. And I think he does the same thing today, even with us. Because look at Jesus' actions. What does Jesus do? It says, they cried out when they saw him walking along, because they thought it was a ghost, because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately, he spoke to them and said, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. So he sees them, then he walks out on the water to them. Do you ever think about what the significance of him walking on the water means? In Job chapter 9, verse 8, if you were to read that, it says that, and Job is describing God. It says that he alone spreads out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. So if you think about it, Job is describing God as the only person capable of walking on water, walking on sea. So when Jesus is walking on the water, he's telling y'all, I am God indeed. And so I'm sitting there thinking that he's saying nobody else can do this but me. Nobody. And if you're a disciple and you see him walking on the water towards you, if nothing else, but maybe they didn't understand just who he really was yet. Because they thought it was a ghost. Even though they've been with him, he's been revealing himself to them, they still don't really understand who Jesus is yet deep inside. You see what I'm getting at? And so they're saying that. So Jesus is coming at them. And then Jesus says, okay, he's saying now, I'm God, just by walking in. But then he says, what? It is I, don't be afraid. I'm like, you knock on the front door. Who is it? It's Dad. So you're supposed to open the door, right? Because you recognize the voice, right? So if a casual or whatever. But when Jesus says, it is I, he carries a little bit more weight. It is I. Especially when he has, don't be afraid to it. Because what Jesus is trying to tell you is, just like in the Old Testament, when God is talking to Moses, he says what? I am who I am. I am. In other words, another connotation is, it is I. He's saying it's I, God, the creator of the universe, the sovereign God, the one who controls the water and the sea, which if you were thinking, you would realize just a few days ago, I said, peace be still, and the water stopped. But it's sort of like, once we get through this, we forget all about this. And when the next thing comes up, we want to have another pity party. And God is saying, listen, it's I. Don't be afraid. Why are you afraid if you know who I am? And what Mark talks about over and over again is just who Jesus Christ really is. He's saying Jesus is the real deal. This is God. And you need to understand that. But I'm thinking about it. Okay, right now we got the disciples. Jesus told them to go, so they went. Then they get out on the lake, and here they are. They're working real hard. They're getting nowhere. Jesus comes to them, and when he comes to them, he speaks. And all of a sudden, they feel okay because the fear subsides, because he gets the water quiet. And now all of a sudden, things going okay. But then something strange happens in verses 51 and 52. It says, then he climbed into the boat with them, and the winds died down. They were amazed. Because sometimes we get amazed at what God does, but we don't internalize it. We're just amazed. Ooh, we are. For they had not understood about the loaves, their hearts were hardened. Now, why is it? If you just told Jesus, tell the water to be still again, why would your hearts be hardened toward him? Have y'all ever thought about that? I mean, it's like you step yourself up, resisting him. Why would hardness of their hearts be an issue that would come up? Because what he's talking about is he's saying something happened with those loaves of bread that they really didn't grasp. They really didn't understand. And what they didn't understand was, what Jesus displayed through that was that he was the bread of life. The life comes through him. And think about it. He's saying, I got power of nature. Now, he showed them that with the water, but who else can make bread out of 2 fishes and 5 loaves of bread, continue to make more and more bread out of his own hand? But we know that Jesus is the only person who can make bread out of nothing. How do we know that? Jesus said in Exodus 16:4, I will rain bread from heaven for you. Think about Satan in Matthew chapter 4. He tells Jesus, because he recognized that Jesus can make bread out of nothing. Listen, why don't you turn these stones into bread? And you don't want to take Satan's word for it. You can go to the end of John, where Jesus says, I am the bread of life. John 6:35. And it's one of those things that I think the problem that the disciples had is the same problem I see a lot of Christians having today. They fail to really understand just who Jesus is. And because they fail to really understand just who Jesus is, they tend to want to go back and have their own little pity party whenever something comes up. Whenever they find themselves in another situation, they start crying out in fear. I just don't know what I'm going to do. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. And they just ain't getting nowhere. Help! And Jesus is like, do you really know who I am? Do you understand the presence and person of Jesus Christ? Whether I'm physically there or not, I'm still in control. Whether I'm physically there or not, I still see you. And if I see you, I'll take care of you. But you've got to have faith. Because see, my taking care of you has nothing to do with you. It's all about my love for you. It's what Christ tells us. It's because of his grace, his mercy that he does for us. And because it's by his own grace that he chose to reveal himself to us. It's because God loves us that he chose to come to earth in man form. What? To die on the cross for us. And we fail to grasp that, to really understand who Jesus is. And while we might be amazed or fascinated by things that we see him doing, until you internalize and realize that that person who's causing all this to happen lives inside of you. He didn't even live inside of them. He was just there. I mean, we're more equipped than they ever were to have peace in this world because of the Christ who lives in us. And I think that should excite us sometimes. And so I start thinking about it. Okay, I was talking to somebody, and somebody who didn't have a job, didn't know where they were going to get a job. God has someone dial their number, tell them you got a job. Okay, they don't have a place to stay. God has somebody call them to tell them, oh, if you were to come to Jackson, you can stay here for 3 or 4 months while you get situated. Now, this right after somebody called them to tell them they had a job that they didn't know they had. Then, car needed fixing. Somebody called them and said, I heard something the other day with your car. Would you like for me to fix that for you? Because I think I know what it is. It ain't no charging nothing because I think I got an extra part around. So, now I'm just lining it up now. So you got the job, you got the car, you got the place to stay. Okay. Reverend Henry, I feel like I'm just doing everything I can, and I just don't hear from God.